The opening scene shows pages of the Bible. Meanwhile, a church announcer introduces the famous Bishop Carlton Pearson. The announcer says that Carlton is currently traveling around the world for his Christian movement in America. After the conference, Carlton flies back to his home in Tulsa. On the plane, Carlton sits beside a middle-aged woman. Apparently, the woman seems stressed out while she talks on her cell phone. Then she starts drinking red wine. After a while, Carlton initiates a conversation with the woman. Carlton asks the woman if she is a lawyer, and she agrees. Then Carlton introduces himself as a pastor. Carlton talks to her about religion, and she mentions that she is Catholic. However, she stopped going to church due to a complicated marriage. Carlton mentions that he is also married and has 2 kids. Further, he tells her that he doesn't want to get married, as family causes distractions from God. However, he loves his family. The woman seems impressed by Carlton's kind and charismatic personality. Carlton tells her that everything happens for a reason. Then he asks her to pray with him. Then the scene transitions to a sermon at a Tulsa church called Higher Dimensions. There, Carlton is talking about his encounter with the woman on the plane. He says that he saved the woman from going to hell. Then he mentions that although he is tired, he won't give up on preaching to more and more people. For this, he receives a lot of applause and cheers from the congregants. After that, Carlton explains that we are sent to the world to love and save each other. Then Carlton starts singing hymns, and all the congregants join in. After the preaching, a senior staff member of the church named Nikki talks with Carlton's wife, Gina Pearson. She reminds her about the women's conference on Friday and asks her to review the scripture. Later, Carlton's fellow church founder and manager named Henry tells Carlton that a lot of people attended today's event. Furthermore, Henry informs about his flight and appointments. Later at night, Gina and the kids have dinner, and Carlton also joins them. After they finish dinner, Gina offers to help Carlton pack his bag for his flight. But Carlton says he's already finished packing. In the morning, Carlton goes to jail to meet his uncle named Quincy. There, Uncle Quincy asks Carlton for a favor. He tells Carlton that the jail has decided to revoke his parole as they found drugs in his room. So, Uncle Quincy asks Carlton to write a letter to the board to help him get out. However, Carlton refuses to help him and tells him that he can't save him. Moreover, Carlton asks Uncle Quincy to change himself, otherwise, he will go to hell. Before leaving, he hugs Uncle Quincy and tells him that he loves him and will visit him again. In the afternoon, Carlton goes to meet his university teacher and father figure, Oral Roberts. Carlton meets him to get advice about Uncle Quincy's matter. During their conversation, Carlton expresses concerns for his relatives and acquaintances who are heading in the wrong direction, feeling unable to save them from hell. Oral suggests he shouldn't think that way, as Carlton has dedicated his whole life to God. Then, Oral shares the story of his gay son named Ronnie, who committed suicide. He explains that this incident fills him with awful guilt, as he couldn't save his own son from doing sins. However, Oral mentions that it's a test from God and it strengthens his faith. Furthermore, Oral confesses that he looks at Carlton as his son. This brings a smile to Carlton's face, and he feels relieved after talking with Oral. Later at home, Carlton discusses plans for arrangements for his preaching in various countries. Henry mentions that they are short on budget. Despite this, Carlton emphasizes on growing and not scaling back as this can help them reach more people. Moreover, Carlton's church musician, Reggie proposes using the local choir band to save money. Meanwhile, Nikki shows them the promotional poster for their events. Gina makes sarcastic comments about the poster, and everyone stares at her. Later, Carlton argues with his wife and tells her that she made everyone uncomfortable with her remarks. In response, Gina tells Carlton that Nikki is not the right choice as a staff member, so he should fire her. However, Carlton tells Gina that he will not fire Nikki just to please her. Then Gina argues that Nikki is always late at events and forces her to wear church hats that she doesn't like. In response, Carlton gets angry and tells her not to wear hats. At midnight, Carlton receives a call from his mother, who tells him that Uncle Quincy has hanged himself. This news deeply affects Carlton, and Ginny tries to console him. The next day, Carlton delivers a eulogy at Uncle Quincy's memorial. He shares that Uncle Quincy raised him and paid his tuition fees. Additionally, he describes Uncle Quincy as a kind man who brings laughter to everyone. Then Carlton mentions that while Uncle Quincy may not have found God in his life, he will still pray for his soul. After the memorial, Carlton meets his mother, who appreciates his words for Uncle Quincy at the memorial. Then they both share memories of their time with Uncle Quincy. During their conversation, Carlton tells his mother about Uncle Quincy's request for a letter. His mother asks him why he didn't write the letter. However, Carlton explains that it's not about the letter. Uncle Quincy wants him to guide him towards God's path. But Carlton feels that Uncle Quincy needs more time. Hearing this, Carlton's mother questions him, reminding him that Uncle Quincy is already 70. After that, she starts crying, and Carlton tries to calm her down. Later at night, Carlton watches news footage of thousands of people killed in the Rwandan genocide. The reporter informs that the death toll of this genocide is 800,000, and almost half of them were children. Seeing this, Carlton becomes extremely depressed, prays, and spends the entire night crying. The next morning, Carlton speaks at the Sunday service at the church. He addresses the congregation about the African refugee victims. He explains that the experience from last night has changed his heart. He heard a voice telling him that these victims would not go to hell, even though they may not be believers. He further explains that these people had no choice due to their suffering. Therefore, they are not destined for hell and are already saved. Hearing this, everyone in the church seems shocked, as Carlton has taught them about hell and heaven throughout his life. After the service, Henry expresses concern about Carlton's words in front of 6,000 people. Carlton tries to explain to Henry why he's questioning the existence of hell. However, Henry tells him that he doesn't understand. Then Henry questions him if those people being saved from hell means that murderers, rapists, and criminals are also saved. Carlton tells him it's a bit confusing, but it's not like that. Carlton proposes that people suffering around the world will not go to hell just because they didn't embrace the teachings of Christ. Henry insists that if those people truly seek God, they will definitely find him. Afterwards, Henry tells Carlton that he should have talked to him before speaking at the church. Later, Carlton arrives home and tells his wife that he is going to an isolated place to fast and pray. The next scene shows Carlton in an isolated house where he prays and asks God for help. Meanwhile, Henry goes to Carlton's house to meet Ginny. There, he asks Ginny about what happened to Carlton. However, she tells him that Carlton doesn't share anything with her. Later, Carlton goes to a local restaurant to meet Reggie. He asks Reggie about his views on the situation. Reggie tells him that he will always stand by his side. Then Reggie mentions that being gay, he's always terrified of hell, so Carlton's words bring him relief. Reggie mentions that Henry says they might end up losing the church. However, Carlton assures Reggie that nothing like this will happen. Meanwhile, Oral arrives at the place to talk with Carlton. Oral asks Carlton what changed his mind overnight. Carlton explains the whole situation to him, but Oral remains skeptical about his views. Oral says that he has achieved a lot by bringing black and white worshippers together. Thus he advises Carlton not to ruin everything like this. He tries to convince Carlton that the voice he hears might be from the devil and that he shouldn't risk his salvation and the spiritual well-being of the thousands of people he preaches to. Oral advises Carlton to address everything at the Sunday service. This leaves Carlton deep in thought. Later at night, Carlton comes back home and Ginny tells him about her meeting with Henry. Ginny informs Carlton that Henry wants to talk to him. Then Carlton tells her that Oral advises him to take back his words. After a while, Carlton questions Ginny if she believes that he talked with God. Ginny responds that her views don't matter. Then, Carlton confesses that it means a lot to him. However, this leads to an argument between them, and Ginny asks him to rethink his actions. The next day, Carlton goes to the sermon to speak. There, he mentions his statement that causes chaos among the whole congregation. He tells them that he has been reading and praying for the entire week to find answers. Afterwards, Carlton advises Henry to read a verse from the Bible. After that, he again tries to prove that there is no hell by explaining the verse. This shocks Henry and Oral. Some people stand up and leave the church, but Carlton keeps insisting that everyone understands his words. The situation becomes uncontrollable as a lot of people get upset and leave the church. However, Carlton tries to remain calm and starts singing hymns, and the remaining people sing along with him. Afterwards, Henry also becomes angry at Carlton as he doesn't recant at the service. Henry tells him that half of the congregation walked away because of him, and this is a sign that he didn't hear God's voice. Later, Oral's son named Richard talks about the situation in a TV show interview. Richard says that Carlton's behavior is unbelievable. He mentions that Oral is upset and disappointed as he raises Carlton like his own son. The next day, Henry goes to Carlton's house and tells him that he is leaving Higher Dimensions. Furthermore, he mentions that he is going to start his church. This worries Carlton, and he tries to convince Henry. Then Henry proposes that he can't be part of this, as if Carlton's proof is wrong, later they all must be responsible. Carlton gets emotional and begs Henry not to leave him like that. Then Carlton mentions that they have built a church that never existed before. They bring white and black people under one roof. However, Henry remains firm in his decision as Carlton refuses to take his words back. The next morning, Ginny and Carlton go to the supermarket, where Ginny meets her friend Keisha. Keisha tells Ginny that she prays for her every day. Later, Carlton goes to meet Reggie. There, Reggie tells him that he's not feeling well and is taking antibiotics. Then Reggie tells Carlton that he's spending time with someone. This makes Carlton anxious, but Reggie reminds him that if there is no hell, he won't be punished. Carlton explains that just because there is no hell doesn't mean people can sin. This leaves Reggie confused. At night, Carlton calls his mother to talk about Uncle Quincy. He mentions that he feels guilty for not helping him. However, his mother gets furious and asks Carlton to stop overthinking. Furthermore, she asks him to keep preaching to people as he did before. Then Carlton goes to dinner with Ginny to celebrate her new job and spend time together. The next day, Carlton receives a call from Pastor Ellis from another church. He invites Carlton to speak at their annual conference, and Carlton agrees. Nikki asks him not to go there as it will put him in a more difficult situation. Reggie also interrupts and tries to stop Carlton from going there. However, Carlton argues that he will go because he believes it's God's will. This makes Reggie leave the place as tears roll down his eyes. After a few days, Carlton attends the conference to share his views. There he explains his sudden realization about the concept of hell. Then he asks some questions to Pastor Ellis to prove his point. However, Pastor Ellis gets triggered and accuses him of preaching false doctrine. Eventually, Carlton fails to present his views in front of everyone. The next scene shows that Carlton loses his church building due to mortgage payments. Later, Carlton and Nikki visit a place to buy for their new church. However, Carlton looks lost and tells Nikki that he's not sure what he will preach now. Nikki stares at Carlton and then gives him a letter. She mentions that Reggie moved back to Texas to live with his mother and asked her to give the letter to Carlton. After a few days, Carlton goes to meet Oral. He tells Oral that he feels lost and doesn't know what to do. Oral apologizes to Carlton for leaving him alone but explains he has no choice. Then Oral expresses surprise that Carlton has decided to give up preaching. Oral advises Carlton to reconsider his decision, as arrogance can separate people from God. Carlton doesn't say a word and leaves. After that, he drives to Texas to meet Reggie. There, Reggie tells him that he is on medication. Carlton apologizes to Reggie and asks him to stay strong. Reggie looks distressed and tells Carlton that he is scared, thinking that God will send him to hell. He blames Carlton for not saving him from hell. Carlton tries to calm Reggie down and tells him that he will not go to hell. Then he assures Reggie to think positively. Afterwards, they both sing hymns together. A few days later, Carlton receives an invitation to speak at another conference. There, he shares that he is scared to speak as he thinks people don't want to listen to him. Then he mentions that he has gone through a lot and feels like an outcast. Furthermore, Carlton tells everyone that he has come there today for the sake of God's love. He thanks God for everything he has in his life. Afterwards, he starts singing hymns, and everyone joins in. In the end, it is revealed that Carlton still lives in Tulsa and continues to preach his message at seminars and churches around the country.